Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well and everyone is staying safe, especially with all that's going on in the world right now. I wanted to upload a video talking about a very important topic right now for people planning on applying to medical school this year, even though I'm pretty sure this year application process is going to look a lot different just because of all that's going on. Anyway, so this video today is going to be talking about choosing medical schools to apply for, how to choose the schools to apply for, sorry, and how to maximize your chances of actually getting into med school during this application cycle or whatever application cycle or whenever you decide to apply for medical school. So I'm gonna start by talking about the MSAR, and that's the medical school admissions requirement, and that's a website that's by the AAMC. So that's the number one thing I'm going to recommend. So when you've decided it's time to apply to medical school, or even when you just decide to start looking at medical schools that you would want to go to, I would recommend highly recommend the MSAR. It's definitely the best tool you can use when it's time to decide what schools to apply for and what schools to avoid in terms of your application. I think I know you purchased this from the AMC website, and I think it's a year subscription or 2 years subscription. I'm not exactly sure, but I know it's about like a year or 2 years subscription. So I got my subscription last year, and right now it's still active, so it might be 2 years, I'm not really sure. Anyways, yeah, so the number one thing I'm going to recommend is the MSAR in terms of looking for schools to apply for. So I'm going to show you a little bit what the MSAR website looks like. So I have it open here on my laptop. So it looks something like this. I'm not sure if you can see, but yeah, that's how it is. So when you click on the school, for example, this is Baylor College of Medicine. When you click on the school you want,
I should have clicked on that before. It's taking a little while to load. Anyways, when you click on that, so you're gonna see, okay, let's see. It's not, let me make it into a tablet so it can be better, I think. Yes, okay. I hope this is actually showing what I wanted to show. Okay, that's not it. Okay, anyways, when you click on the website, you're gonna see different information about the school. It's gonna tell you about, geez, you think I would know how to. Anyway, it's gonna tell you about like the enrollment status. The most important information though is if you keep scrolling down. It pretty much gives you a lot of information about what the school requires. It gives you the application deadline, the MCAT deadline, stuff like that. But the important information for me, it shows you about like the courseworks that are required. This is not going as I like it. Yeah, courseworks required. It shows you that. Still know what I'm searching for. Yeah, so this is where I'm searching for right now. No. Okay, yeah, this is what I'm searching for. So it's gonna show you the acceptance data. Okay, and then right there it's gonna see for the MCAT, it's gonna show you the MCAT scores, and it's gonna show you the ranges of scores that I think this is for the last class or something like that. But anyway, it gives you an idea of like the scores. It shows you the median score. So for this, the median score was 5, 8, 10, and it's ranged different percentile. It had the 514 ranges up to 523. That was for the MCAT. It also shows you the section breakdown for the school. It shows you the GPA data. It shows you the median score. For this, it was 3. It's probably not the best choice to use, but this was 3.92, and it ranges from 3.7 to 4.0. It shows you how much, verified applicants versus interviewed applicants and all that good stuff. And another important information it shows you is the amount of out-of-state versus in-state students.
Get the school accepted. I think that's important for when you start applying to public schools that are out of state. But anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We're gonna get there. Anyway, so personally, when it was time for me to apply for schools, there are certain things that I kind of prioritized in terms of looking for what schools to apply for. Honestly, when it was time for me to apply for school, I did not have like a top choice in terms of like a school that I'm like, oh, I'm dying to get into. I think it was kind of because, you know, I realized that this whole med school application process, it's kind of like, you know, you can't really predict it. And I did not want to get my hopes up for like a particular school that I really loved or want to go to and end up not getting into it and then being disappointed. So I just wanted to be happy with whatever school I eventually get into. So I think that's why I did not have like a top choice, because everyone was asking throughout the process, so what's your top choice school? What's your top choice school? I'm like, honestly, I have no top choice school. I'm just gonna be happy. Whatever school I get into, whatever med school I get into, I'm just gonna be happy to be there. And that's the kind of that's the outlook I had towards this whole application process. Anyways, but the certain things I looked at when I was applying to school. So I applied to about 21 schools, which some people might be thinking, oh, that's a lot of schools, but trust me, that's the amount you should be targeting. Most people tell you to target between 15 to 20 schools. I would say to be safe, I would just say 20 schools, at least 20 schools. When you start to get outside of 20 schools, then it gets to be kind of difficult in terms of like the secondaries, which I'm going to talk about in the later videos, because that's another old beast that had to be slain. So I would say, okay, 15 to 20 schools should be the range you should be looking for. You don't want to do, and you don't want to apply to schools under 10, just to maximize your chances. And again, I understand that there are different factors that play roles into what school, into, you know, the application process. For example, finances, because it is really expensive. And if you're looking at more than 20 schools, I understand that that's a lot of money that you're going to have to invest. So I think that's something for those of you that are still like either maybe in undergrad or, you know, freshmen, is something you want to be thinking about in terms of like saving to apply to schools. Also, the fee assistance program, please, that is something you should look into as well to see if you qualify for it. That is something that was really important for me. So I did qualify for the fee assistance, and that's 20 schools you can apply to, and it's free, and the secondaries are also free. So please, that's something you should make sure you look into in terms of whether or not you qualify. It's gonna save you a lot of money in the long run. Anyways, so I applied to 21 or 22, something within that range, 21, 22 schools. The reason why I can't say the exact amount is because when I applied to some schools, but I did not finish the application. So actually, you know what, I'm gonna say I completed the application of 21 to 22 schools, and by that I mean I completed the primary and I also completed all their secondaries. So yeah, when it was time to decide schools, I used the MSAR like I showed you. I looked at the GPA and the MCAT scores. So if you all remember, I had a 513 as my second MCAT, a 502 as my first MCAT, a 3.5 as my undergrad GPA, and a 3.95 as my graduate GPA. So when I was looking for schools to apply to, I was looking for schools that had scores within that range. I did not I realized when I was trying to come up with like look through the schools I applied to, I realized I applied to like a lot of target schools. And when I say target schools, I mean like schools that I kind of fell within their range, right? Just because I did not really apply to a lot of rich schools, honestly. I just did not want to waste my time. I knew this process was really grueling and I did not want to do it. Like I said, I did not want to do it again. So I applied to a lot of target schools, but I'm also going to talk about how target schools might not exactly be target schools. So anyways, like I was saying, I looked at the GPA and MCAT score, and as I showed you before, I looked at the median score, right? And then I also looked at whether or not, sorry, let me just log to this laptop. So yeah, I looked at their median score. For example, let me see one of the schools, and I would like go through it with you. Let's say Drexel. That's a school I applied to. So I looked at, for example, for Drexel, I came to the MSAR, I looked at their GPA, and the GPA, the median score of the GPA was 3.75, which wasn't my score. That's higher than my undergrad score. So yeah, for this I mostly looked at my undergrad compared my undergrad GPA to the and then I left my grad GPA as a back burner. It was like an extra boost, but I kind of focused on my undergrad GPA in terms of choosing schools. Now that's just that was a thing I did personally. I don't really know the technicalities behind, you know, using your undergrad GPA and your graduate GPA, but that's what I did. So let's say the total GPA for the median score was 3.75, which I was below. But then when you look, you would see like the range of the scores they accepted was from 3.39 to 3.95, and I knew my score was above a 3.39, so it fell somewhere in the middle right over there. So I knew that was a score I could apply to. And then when it came to the MCAT, I looked at the MCAT as well. Okay, so their MCAT, the median was 512, which means my MCAT score was a little bit higher, and their range was from 508 to 517. So I knew that, okay, you know, that's a school that I fell within the range. So that's what I did in terms of like looking for schools based on the MCAT and the GPA scores. Then I also looked for locations of schools. Now, when it came to location, I knew I wanted to be somewhere close to my family, close to home, which is Maryland. Excuse me, sorry. So I wanted to be somewhere close to home, which was Maryland, but at the same time, I did not want to limit myself to just being home. So anyways, I applied to a lot of schools in the Northeast region. I applied to schools in, okay, there's only one school in Maryland. I applied to University of Maryland, I applied to DC schools, I applied to schools in Virginia, I applied to schools in New York, I applied to other schools as well. Like I said, I did not want to limit myself. So as much as location was a big part for me, it wasn't the biggest part. Like I applied to Creighton. Creighton was in Nebraska, and I did go for an interview in Creighton, so I went to Nebraska. So, and that's a story for another time. But yeah, so location wasn't like, it was something I considered, but it wasn't an handicap for me. I could have gone anywhere. I applied to a school in Iowa. I applied to University of Iowa. I applied to Duke, of course, and schools in North Carolina as well. So location, although it was something I thought about, it wasn't like the biggest handicap for me. I find that some mistakes that people make, it may not even necessarily be a mistake, because people, either people have family, or they're married, or they have significant others in a specific state, so they're trying to stay home, but that kind of also it kind of affects your chances, because you're not going to be shooting that broadly, right? For example, applying to New York schools, those are schools that get a lot of applications, right? So if that was like my only focus, you know, applying to all the New York schools, and, you know, maybe then applying to schools in California, you should know that those are places that a lot of people want to go to, and so they receive a lot of application, and so it's kind of a little bit more competitive getting into those schools. Anyway, so that's that for location. I also looked at schools that had connections with my master's program. Like I said, my special master's program was the Duke MBS, and the good thing about the program is that it had a lot of connection with other schools. So there were schools that knew about the MBS program, what it was about. We had like students that had already gone to those schools. So schools like that had connection with my special master's program. I did apply to them. That's why I ended up applying to Creighton, because we had an admissions officer from Creighton actually come to the program to talk to us about applying to the school. So that's why I applied to Creighton all the way in Nebraska. And University of Iowa, I'd heard that previous students from the program had gone to the school, so I definitely applied to. So I applied to University of Iowa. Yeah. So, and then I applied to some schools in North Carolina as well, even though I wasn't from North Carolina, because those were schools that had connection or knew about the program. So one advice I would give, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is a balance. Make sure there's a balance between your rich schools, your target schools, and your safe schools. But with that said, I'm just gonna announce it, like there are no safe schools when it comes to applying to medical school. No school should be considered safe, and I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make as well, is because they think, oh, my GPA or my MCAT is above their median or their range, so I'm definitely good to go. But that's not true, because, you know, as we all know, or you should know, most schools try to give a holistic what's the word, review of applications, which means not just your scores or your numbers that matters, but as well as your extracurriculars, the essays you write. And trust me, you write a lot of essays. They want to see how best you fit in with those schools. So yeah, so that's a mistake you should be aware of. So don't just focus on the numbers as much as which sounds funny because I just told you I focused on the numbers, but it wasn't just the numbers for me. Like I said, there were other things I looked at before I applied to the schools. The numbers was just to make sure I wasn't, what's the word, deceiving myself, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. But like I said, for me, the balance between them was that I wasn't going to be applying to a lot of rich schools. Honestly, I think Duke, Case Western, and maybe 2-3 schools or 4 schools were the only rich schools I applied to. I focused more on target schools, which are schools that I felt somewhere within their range. That was a huge part of my application. And then like the safe schools were kind of like not that much either. I think the target schools was the highest, the safe schools, then rich schools. And I'll tell you why I did not really focus on safe schools that much. So another big thing to be aware of is applying to out-of-state schools. So definitely we all know, or you should know, that in-state schools are often cheaper in terms of tuition, right? So you want to make sure you're applying to your state school, and you do most times have a higher chance of getting into your state school as an in-state student than another student that's an out-of-state student. Just as you wouldn't have as high of a chance applying to a different school in a different state compared to someone that's from that state, if that makes sense. Anyways, now this is the point I want to make. While there are schools, out-of-state schools, and this doesn't apply to the private schools, obviously, that it's more kind of like equal most times for most people, for most schools, for most institutions. But if you're applying to state schools, make sure that are state schools, make sure you find out the percentage of out-of-state students that they accept, and whether or not they even accept out-of-state students. And that's something I did not realize, but thank God, my advisor, when I sent her the list of schools I wanted to apply to, she looked at it and I was like, okay, this school, nope, they do not accept out-of-state students. So, or they accepted a very, really low percentage of out-of-state students. That would have just been a waste of application and waste of money. So make sure that's something you pay attention to when applying to out-of-state schools. Like, what percentage of out-of-state do they accept out-of-state students, and what percentage of out-of-state students do they accept? I can't think of schools just like that from the back of my mind that do not accept out-of-state students, but I know there was like quite a bit of them when I was searching for schools. So that's something to think about. Let's see. So going back to why I said there are no safe schools and why I did not focus on applying to just safe schools. You definitely should not. Yeah, you shouldn't just apply to just schools you consider safe. And the reason what I observed when I was applying was that these schools that you consider safe, other people also consider them safe, right? Or not even safe, or let's say target, right? Schools that are target schools, a lot of people also consider them target schools or safe schools, which means they're receiving a whole lot of applications. And I find that these schools, because they're receiving a whole lot of applications, it's kind of harder for them to give. Now, I'm just going to say you, but when I say you, I'm referring to, anybody or myself. And this might be something that's not true. Like I said, this is not a tested and tried fact. This is something I just realized when I was applying, is that this schools might not readily give me a chance in terms of, because my scores were, they're not like out of the world groundbreaking scores, so they might not necessarily give you a chance in terms of offering interviews or in terms of acceptance, because they're receiving a lot of applications. But when it comes to these other schools, maybe rich schools or schools that may be a little bit on the higher side in terms of their numbers, they might readily give you a chance, or I thought for myself I did readily get a chance from those schools, because then they consider not just the numbers you're bringing in, but your extracurriculars as well, like not your entire story, I guess is what I would say. And I don't know if that made sense. I can go into details better. If any of you are confused, just let me know. But that's something I noticed that schools that I considered safe or target schools kind of either did not respond on time to my application, or put me on hold, or flat out rejected me. And schools that I wasn't even thinking would like pay attention to my application ended up like reaching out to me and giving me an interview or giving me an acceptance. So that's just something I noticed. I feel like, yeah, I'm just gonna stop there. But if you want me to go into more details, please let me know. Anyways, that's something so there's something I would say though. I would say when you're applying to schools, I feel like those things I mentioned first were the things I considered first. And then when you sent in those applications, or maybe even before you send in those applications, maybe if you've had like, let's say you have like 30 schools and now you're like trying to narrow it down, these are things that are really important though. Very important too is also thinking about the school's vision and mission, and if it's something you relate to. And the reason why I bring this up is because when you start filling out the secondaries, you have to do a lot of research about the schools, and you want to make sure and when it's a school that you actually like and not just a school you're applying to, when it's a school that you can actually relate to their vision and mission, then you're able to write good essays or give them good responses on your secondary prompts. So that's something I would say. You want to think about the special interest about the schools, like what do they focus on? Are they research focused? Are they public health focused? Are they, humanities focused? You want to know about that. You want to know the grading system, which I would say pass or fail or nothing else. I'm just joking. But yeah, pass or fail. That's one thing I was looking for. Pass or fail. Then the other ones I'm going to talk about now, probably maybe not something for like the match list. Okay, that's what I'm going to talk about. The match list, so that's not something I paid as much attention to, but that's something you should pay attention to. But maybe not when you're applying like straight off the bat, like in terms of primaries. If you have time, definitely look into that. But that's something I started to look into towards when I was doing the secondaries. Is this worth my time? Or towards the interview time, or when it's time to pick a school, if you're like deciding between more than one school, or 2-3 schools, that's something you want to pay attention. Financial considerations, yeah, that's speaking about out-of-state schools. So most times they're more expensive than in-state schools, and other schools also, private schools, might be more expensive. So that's something you want to think about too, in terms of how high you're aiming and schools you're choosing. So financial considerations. I would say in all, when it comes to applying to schools, because this whole application process, like you would hear me say a lot, is all about telling your story. While the numbers matter, a lot of other things matters equally, if not more than. Your extracurriculars matter. The essays and how you tell your story matters. I feel like the whole application kind of tells a story of who you are, and that's one of the major things, and that matters. So you want to make sure your application actually tells a story about who you are, what your values are, where you've been and how far you've come, stuff like that. And when that happens, when you're able to put forth an application that tells that story, I feel like even schools that you think are your rich schools are probably gonna contact you and interview you, and probably an acceptance. So that's one thing I focus on a lot. Okay, now with that being said, I'm gonna talk about my, like, in terms of like stats, right? So I applied to, like I said, about 23 schools, and that's in terms of like completing your secondaries and stuff. So I applied and completed the application for 23 schools. I applied to 23 schools, received 10 interviews, withdrew from 7 schools before I got response from them. Out of the 10 interviews, I attended 6 interviews. I got 3 acceptances and the other 3 waitlisted me. But yeah, so yeah, 6 interviews attended, 3 acceptance from interviews, and 3 waitlists from the interviews I attended. Like I said, I withdrew my application before I got a response from 7 schools. And what that means is these are schools that did not reject me or offer me an interview. I just withdrew the application before I got a response from them. And then I got 5 rejections, pre-interview rejections. So I did not get any post-interview rejections, but I got 5 pre-interview rejections. So yeah. And oh, in case you're wondering what schools it was, so in terms of the interviews I attended Drexel interview, Drexel School of Medicine interview, University of Maryland interview, Creighton interview, Eastern Virginia Medical School interview, Duke University interview, and University of Virginia interview. So those were the 6 interviews I attended. I was accepted at Drexel and University of Virginia and Duke University. I was waitlisted at the University of Maryland, Creighton, and Eastern Virginia Medical School. And yeah, so that's, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover in this video. And I hope this video has been kind of really helpful in terms of choosing the schools you want to apply to, or even just thinking about schools that you might want to apply to. And also, the earlier you start in thinking about schools that you want to apply to, the better it is when it's time to apply. That's something I did not do early enough, and I definitely advise that you start on it early as you can. So I hope you all liked the video, and I hope you all found the video helpful. So if you enjoyed the video or you found it really helpful, please remember to hit the like button and also leave a comment down below. Also leave a comment below if you have any questions, or if there are anything that I mentioned that you'd like me to go into more details about. Also leave a comment below if there are any videos or topics you'd like me to do a video about. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.